Hey guys, it's Jordan with Main Deck, and today I have a deck that'll hopefully increase your ability to play some mind games. Let's get into it. Hey guys, today we're going to be jumping right into the deck tech. I have a deck that I'm really excited to show you guys. It's a little less tested, so feel free to tweak it as you guys see fit, but the little bit of testing I did has been fairly successful. So we're just gonna hit the table and show you what we got. We have a Dabi deck. Now, one of my favorite parts about this deck is your ability to really play mind games with the opponent and kind of bait them into doing stuff or blocking things that they probably wouldn't have done normally just because they don't exactly know what you're going to be doing. Which leads us to Dobby himself. We'll just go over those enhances and we'll go from there. So we have Dobby. He's a 6-hander, 28 health, and he has 3 enhances, 2 of which you'll only be using 1 of on each attack. The first one we'll go over last. It's something we'll just go over last. We'll go over the first enhances first. So you can either give your next attack plus 3 damage, or you can give your current attack plus 1 speed, plus 3 or plus 1 damage. And this is where the real fun for Dobby comes in. I've built the deck, as you can probably see as a preview for some of the cards we're going to be going over, around really making your opponent think whether you're going to attack more than once, or if you're just going to attack once. A lot of times you might be making decisions as Dobby that you normally wouldn't otherwise. For example, if you were going to attack 1 time, the normal thing to do is to just do your this attack gets +1/+1, because you know you have no more attacks. There's no reason to buff the next attack because you know it isn't coming. But the real power of Dobby that a lot of people I think don't notice outright is the fact that you can make your opponent think you're going to be attacking more than once. Whether you have another attack or not kind of depends on you and whether you're even going to attack. Maybe you just plan on attacking once and building anyway, but don't let your opponent know that. Sure, you may be losing 1 speed, 1 damage, but the other effect is your next attack, if you call as +3 damage, chances are the enemy will think, well, he has another attack, and whatever it is going to be worse. I should probably wait, hold my block, and block whatever comes next, because this current attack isn't really going to kill me. And that's the thought process that'll win you the game. Basically, you want to just keep baiting your opponent into blocking or not blocking certain things, so you just kind of take them down slowly until they just have to block everything or die. And that's when you really start putting on the pressure. And we just kind of layer on top of that over and over again. So I just want to get that out of the way first, because that's how the whole deck is built, with that mentality of choosing tactically which of those 2 first enhances to use to essentially get your opponent thinking that this is going to happen. And on that same note, you could also use this attack gets +1/+1 after you've attacked once or twice, making them think that that's the end of your attack string. Because again, most of the time the base logic is, I don't have any more attacks, I might as well just buff this one. Or sometimes you will have other attacks that are more important, and you just want your opponent to think that it's the end. So if they're holding blocks, that they're like, okay, well, now's the time to block because he's not attacking anymore. I might as well just block this anyway. And then they use their key block, and then you attack some more, and they're like, well, now there's stuff in my card pool, and I blocked something that wasn't as threatening as it could be, so on and so forth. So with that, we'll get to the other enhance, which you can also use to leverage the early mid to mid game, and sometimes even the late game, to just finish off the opponent after you've been chunking them and forcing them to think twice about whether they're going to block or not block, which is enhance. Once per game, remove 10 foundations from your discard pile. Your attack gets +8 damage and gains throw. Your rival may destroy all of their ready foundations to cancel this effect. Very potent, really puts your opponent against the wall. They forces them to, either destroy most of their board, or they have to have some sort of tech like wall cling or faith shield or something to really do, throw hate against. Because if they don't, then they're left with, well, am I going to be able to stop this attack? And even if I do, I'm going to be taking, boatload of damage most of the time. With a lot of the attacks and other things in your +3 and the +8, even any attack, even the weakest attack in your deck is going to be chunking them for about 8 after they block anyway. So one thing to note with this though, you have to remove 10 foundations, so you can't do it super early. Whether you do it really early in the turn or late in the turn as the finisher is really up to you and kind of the flow of how the game's been going. There's been some matches that I've played where it's better to lead with it and give your opponent that ultimatum immediately, so if they do decide to destroy everything, they're most likely going to have most of their ready foundations at the beginning of the turn before they've blocked anything. Another reason is because then if they do decide to blow everything up to cancel it so they can block this, if you have a bunch of other attacks, you know, waiting, lying in wait, chances are after the first block, it's going to be really hard for them to block when they only have committed foundations on the field. Making your other attacks, especially since they're going to be beefy, just have that much more chance of finishing them off anyway. Yeah. So that's a good use of that. Another one caveat with this is keep in mind it's only destroying their readied foundations. If you try to pull this off and your opponent has everything committed, they can literally just cancel it for free because they can destroy all of their ready foundations, which is 0, which is legal because, you know, they just have to destroy their ready foundations. Once they've destroyed 0 because they have no ready, then they just cancel it for free. So please be aware of that. I've had a couple friends that have tried out Dobby accidentally run into that conundrum where they're like, oh, I can't actually use this because everything's committed, which isn't a bad thing because then, you know, like I said before, then you can just make stuff fast and blast through them. But it's good to note all of those caveats about that once per game. I think a lot of people look at the once per game and think that that's all that Dobby is. It is good, and it is good in a lot of situations. But again, I think the true power really lies in those mind games you can play with the first enhances, and the once per game is just that little extra push to kind of give you an edge here and there. So without further ado, we'll get into the actual other cards of the deck besides Dobby himself. We'll start off with our action cards, and we got For the Win at 1 copy. Now this isn't doing anything, you know, super crazy. We have a fair amount of enhances on board, and all of our attacks have 1 or 2 enhances. Sometimes people do 1, maybe 2 defensive options, which allows you to use your response and when they pass and gain +2 speed on attack. That'll be relevant half the time, and since we can make things fairly big with the +3 and all the other modifiers on board, being able to just give it some extra speed to maybe make it just unblockable or make them overcommit to block one thing, this is really nice. It just allows you to have that little extra push, and then it also has form. If you're a little bit behind on foundations, you can destroy 1 foundation to build the top 2 cards of your deck face down and then remove it from the game. The main reason it's in here, if we're really being honest though, is the +1 low block. I debated adding another attack in that had low blocks, and you can kind of see the sideboard. Again, my sideboards for these decks are generally just cards that are being considered for the main deck. I don't like to suggest actual side decks just because they're highly dependent on the meta, what you feel as a weakness of the deck, things like that. So my sideboard is just reserved for cards to consider for the deck as well, or cards that I'm considering adding or swapping out as I play the deck and decide what it needs. But yeah, the main reason it's in here is because both of the effects are not bad. They're fairly relevant, but the main reason it's here is because we're a little bit low on low blocks. So with this one, it brings it up to 13, which is at least, you know, okay. You can get by with 13 low blocks. It's not the end of the world. So I was just in there because I needed something, and I didn't want a 3 check of an attack in there, so I'd rather have the 5 check with a low block. And then the next one we got is 2 copies of Sugar Rush Power Up. It's a great high block, again, shoring up those block modifiers, and it allows you to remove it and remove 10 cards from your discard pile and get +2 speed, +4 damage. This will go live roughly around the time that your once per game goes live, probably earlier because it doesn't have the stipulation of just foundations. But it also allows you to, once your opponent does block the wrong thing, and then you do your real ace in the hole, or even if you just buff that throw to make the throw even better, if you know the opponent's going to block the throw, for example, and it's not going to kill at half, boost this, make that throw faster, and give it damage. Because one of the power of adding throw to anything is most of our attacks in general, since they're not throws normally, are going to have pretty nice speed. Giving, you know, a 5 speed attack into a 7 and then giving it throw, it makes it a terrible ultimatum in the end, because the opponent either has to block it for half and it's going to do a lot of damage, so they're probably going to want to half block it anyway with the throw, or not half block, sorry. They're going to want to block the throw, and they're going to take half damage regardless. But when they're having to block a throw that's also like 7, 9, maybe even 10 speed, that just makes it really hard. And sometimes this +2 speed just makes it not possible to block. So that +8 damage just gets all the way through, and you don't have to worry about them blocking with some weird throw tech like wall cling, because you just make it unblockable. It also allows you to flip one rival foundation with the ability to reduce damage. Doesn't come into play that often, but it's nice that it has that option. If you know that instead of playing something like wall cling or doing something like face shield, they just have a bunch of onboard, lower this damage or reset the damage to 2 or something. I believe it works that way. If it would reduce the damage, I'd have to double check that in the rules. But I want to say that doing something like, I think it's training with gunhead, the one that reduces a throw attack to 2's damage, that counts as, or not reduce, but sets it to 2. I believe if the set would put it under what it's current, it counts as reducing for this effect. But again, it's a muddy interaction that I'd have to double check for you. But either way, there's things, we have a lot of Furies. There's cards like Bonds of Friendship that reduce the damage by 3, which is a fair chunk. So being able to just flip that foundation and be like, nah, you can't do that, is also relevant. But 9 times out of 10, you'll be using this for the block zone, or you'll be using it for the +2 speed and +4 damage. After that, we'll head into the attacks, starting with one that I like using. It's not used in a lot of decks, but in some decks it really shines. We got Longlasting Explosion. It's an okay block, mid 2, 5 diff, but it has awesome stats, and in this deck just really helps you push those mind games even harder. We have 5 mid for 6, which on its own, already a great attack. If you end up doing the +1/+1, you have a 6 mid for 7 damage on a 5 diff with a 3 check. That's golden. You have other buffs in the deck as well, so this is going to do a lot of work for you. But the main reason it's here as well is the enhance. If your next attack is a high, it gets +3 speed. If it's a mid, it gets +3 damage. With Dobby's next attack gets +3, that means you're telling them, if I'm attacking again, which again, you're trying to play mind games here, so you might not even have a second attack, but that makes it very threatening to them, thinking, oh, well, whatever he throws next is either going to be +6 damage or +3 speed, +3 damage, which is not a fun thing to think about when the other attacks in the deck are doing, 4, 5, or 6 damage. Or, you could even just play this a second time, and now they're thinking, oh, well, the next one is going to be, possibly a 6 speed for 13 damage. So I better, I've had people literally just eat this attack, and then I just didn't attack again. I do the +3 damage on Dabi, do this enhance. It scares them enough to where they won't block it because they're fearful of the next attack being much worse. And then you just get away with a free 6, maybe 7 or 8 damage, depending on your other stuff on board or more. It just does wonders. The mind games you can play with this. And again, sometimes after they get used to you not attacking a second time, they'll just block this, and then you do have another attack that comes with +6 or +3/+3, and then they really regret it. It really makes them, again, think twice about any time they're going to block or not block, and it has frazzled some opponents to the point where they're just like, I don't know what I should do here or what the right option is. But yeah, so we run 4 copies of those. It does great work on its own. It's a great opener or even a second card to play. It gets a little more expensive if you're going to play it more than 2 times, but we have some other foundations that allow you to at least play 2 attacks fairly cheaply on the regular, which is nice. With that, we'll go to the next attack. We got Dobby's attack himself, Blue Flame Spiral. It has a nice low block. It's a 3 mid for 5 on a 5 diff, but you can ready 2 foundations on your opponent's side to give it +4 speed. That's a virtual speed increase of +2. 9 times out of 10 people have flip effects, so you're probably just going to be readying 2 face down, so they most of the time won't get any value outside of just having the readied foundations. But again, this makes it a 7 mid for 5, just like Longlasting Explosion. Those raw stats are already really nice. And it does a little extra trick here. This is a good thing to do if your opponent tries to counter your add +8 damage and throw by tapping a fair amount of stuff. So for example, when you use it, they only have to destroy 1 or 2 or 0 or something. This allows you to ready some foundations so they have some ready. So then they do have to at least pay some or be paying more to make sure that their ultimatum of destroy everything ready or give it throw and +8 is a little bit more potent. And to top it all off, being a fast attack here, we have discard the top 3 cards of your deck. This attack deals damage, destroy 1 rival asset or foundation, and you get to choose what that is, so you get to pick the most threatening thing on the opponent's board and get rid of it if they don't block it. And being a 7 speed, even though you did ready 2 of their foundations, 7 speed is still rough, with most block modifiers being 2 on average. That means they're gonna, have to check a 9. Even if they check a 5, they still have to commit 4 things, which is gonna be great if this is your opener or your second card and you have more attacks coming, because they just had to commit 4 or maybe 5 if they checked an attack in order to stop this from just blowing something up. We got 4 copies of those because that creates, great dynamic. The next one we got is 3 copies of Instant Explosive Release. It's a great just cantrippy attack, kind of, or not cantrip because it doesn't redraw itself, but it does 3 high for 3 damage, and it only costs 3, making it really good to just play out randomly later in the turn. And since we're giving most things +3 damage, if it's, this obviously won't be your opener most of the time unless your back is against a wall. But so with that +3, it's a 3 high for 6, which is respectable, plus all your other onboard effects, maybe the +1/+1, making it a 4 and, 7, which is pretty threatening on its own. And it comes with, if this attack, add this attack to your momentum after it resolves. Only playable if your first attack dealt damage. Since we're doing a lot of baiting, a lot of times, like I said, you can bait your opponent into just letting that first attack go, because they're going to think the next attack is beefy. And in this case, the next attack will be, pretty beefy. And like I said, it can be up to a 4 plus 7 damage. And that's not counting in your foundations or if you Sugar Rush power up. That's just with Dobby's effect. And that's pretty good. And it makes it a little bit not painful to block, I should say, because at the end of the turn it clears itself, making it easier to play more attacks. It also has the text enhance if this attack deals damage, so if they decide not to block it, because it will be probably the least threatening card in your deck given its base stats. If it does deal damage, then your opponent's next attack then your attack gets +2 damage for the next one. So with Dobby's effect, that means you can potentially have the next attack gets +5. Again, creating a dynamic where they're like, well, do I want to block this? Because this is going to do 6 damage, on average. The next one's going to get +5, which is almost this damage already. Should I risk using my blocks now, or just hope that he doesn't have another attack and he's bluffing? Again, just building on that dynamic of what do I do? Do I just block this, or do I let it through? Because there could be worse things coming. And then it's just nice that it clears the card pool, it's cheap to play, and like I said, most of the time you will be able to bait your opponent into not blocking, or in some cases just half blocking, making it still go to momentum after it casts. It also gives you some momentum, which we can use in not a ton of ways currently with this attack lineup, but we do run Nitro Explosion, so any attack could eventually become a powerful attack. So we got next one. We got 4 copies of Confident Counter Strike. I believe it's supposed to be Counter Strike, but if you take note, they didn't spell it correctly on the card. So it's Confident Counter Strike. It's a nice 4 diff, creates a little bit easier play. These will be your, if you're looking for Blue Flame or Long Lasting most time will be your openers, maybe Nitro. So the rest of the attacks I wanted to be a little bit less in difficulty, going for that 4 diff range. This has a great mid block, and that's relevant for its response. And this card in general, I've also kind of added, and I'm glad I found a place for it, just because I've been wanting a deck that uses it because I really like its effect. This was in one of my top 5 cards I'm most excited about for the set, so I'm happy to have a deck that actually uses it and uses it on all cylinders. So we got, it's a mid 5 for 4 damage. The damage is a little weak, but it'll probably have given it's not going to be your opener, it'll probably have the +3 damage from Dabi. So this is on average going to be a 5 mid for 7. If it's the attack you use your +1 on, it's going to be a 6 speed for 8 damage. And that's good. And if your opponent didn't take the bait and they did block the first attack, this one has enhanced. If your last attack was blocked, this gets 3 damage. So that just kind of adds more layers, like I said, to playing the mind games. Because no matter what your opponent does now, with an attack like this in your kit, they are always fearful whether they block it or not, because if they don't block it, they save a block for later. If you don't actually have another attack for later, they wasted a chance to block something. If they do block it, then they're fearful that you're going to confident counter strike them for 10 damage, because after the it's at 7 from Dobby. Then with this, if they did block it, it gets another 3. That makes it a 10. That makes it a 5 mid for 10. You give it the +1/+1. That's a 6 mid for 11, not counting any foundation or action card. That's just Dobby and whether your opponent blocked the first attack or not. It creates, like I said, it creates a really fun dynamic where your opponent is just like, there is no right answer here. What do I do? What do I want to stop? They might just start blocking everything as it comes out, which gives you a good in to then really load your last attack heavy, because they're never going to know when the last attack is coming. And like I said before, it has a +1 mid block that gives you nice defense as well, and it has a response that says after you block with this card, your opponent loses 2 health, or they may discard a card to instead, essentially, to cancel the -2 health. So on defense, it also does great work. Sometimes you'll just outright kill your opponent. If they're sitting at 2 or 1 health, or sometimes 4 or lower, and you have 2 of them in your hand, being a mid block means you can always use this to block anything, unless they have some modifier that says it can't be completely blocked, or can't use mid block, or can't block with attacks. There's very few cards that do stuff like that, so chances are you will be able to block anything your opponent throws, and being at a +1, that makes it that much easier. This just makes it so they might just randomly start losing health on their turn. Getting them down to low health means you have a couple of outs. You can add throw. You have highs in the deck as well, meaning they might just not have a block for it. In this case, you can make stuff fast, or you just make it so you block and they die. Because the lose health on this doesn't say to a minimum of 1 like some of the other cards, so this can be lethal when you block with it. Which, again, is really good. It creates a nice threatening position whether you have it on offense or defense. So that's why we run 4 copies of this bad boy. And the last attack we have in the main lineup here is Nitro Explosion Ignition. Got a nice 1 block. It's a 4 diff, making it a little easier to play later in the turn. It's a 5 high for 4, so it's already nice and speedy out the gates with a decent amount of damage. Most of the time you're going to be, this one actually I could see a case for being an opener, but even if it's not the opener, most of the time being a 4 diff, you'll play it a little bit later as the second, maybe the third attack if you're not going for the powerful at this moment. And it'll be a 7 damage attack with Dobby most of the time. And even if it's not, having a 6 high for 5 damage without any other buffs with just your character still seems pretty good. And being in the card pool, we don't have any ways of discarding stuff from the card pool, but we have things like instant explosive release that does leave the card pool during combat phase. So sometimes you'll just get momentum for this, and this response in the card pool will allow you to get second momentum, which means if you opened with this, it dealt damage, you played an instant explosive release, it goes to momentum, you get a second momentum from the Nitro's response, you play a third attack in your second slot, you can now powerful 2 it twice, giving it 4 more damage. That's 2 attacks in. Chances are they may or may not have blocked something or half blocked something. They might be low on resources. Maybe the third attack you just make huge and make it a throw, giving this powerful really nice effect. And that's just all off the cards that you played that turn. You needed no previous momentum to do something like that. So again, just creating those dynamics and lines of play where it just puts your opponent in a really, really difficult position on every attack you throw. And that closes our current attack lineup here that we have in the main deck that I'm currently testing, which jumps us over to the foundation lineup. So we got aiming for number 1. I always like to add 1 copy of this in any person who can play it properly, just because it's a very potent effect. A lot of people draw cards, a handful of them will discard cards from you, and this just gives you a defense on at least the front where they're drawing cards. If they're drawing a bunch of cards, you can cause them to discard it, or you can choose to remove it and give yourself 2 more cards if you're looking for that extra block, or maybe an extra attack if they're trying to draw cards on their turn or on your turn. Basically, it just gives you a nice wiggle room to decide whether you want them to have 1 less card when they drew or give you more cards when they draw, making you at an advantage no matter what. But again, it's a 3 difficulty, not super crucial to what we're doing, so I just have that at the 1 copy. We got 2 copies of League Interview here. It's a nice 6 check. It's a foundation that allows you first form discard the top 2 cards of your deck, which allows you to get closer to the threshold of Sugar Rush power up and your 10 foundations if you want to use your once per game a little earlier. And it gives you your next check to play an attack +1. So you can have the freedom of knowing that most likely you're going to be playing yours at worst your tap 1. We have only 5 diffs as our highest difficulty currently in the deck, and our lowest check is a 3. So with this +1, even if you do check an attack on your 5 diff, you're only tapping 1. Really minimizes the risk of playing your attacks once you have it out. And it also has, you can flip it after you check a block. The block gets +1, and that's before you pay. So essentially this gives you 2 resources on a block you really need to pass. And it's really potent because it's on the check for a block. So you don't have to use this ability until you know you need it. So once you see the check, you're like, okay, I have to block this. I'm going to flip this. And then it's also available to commit afterwards as a face down foundation. So gives you some nice defense. It's not super crucial all the time. That's why we only got 2 copies. I've thought about upping it to 4 in some cases, but we already have enough mid blocks is really the real reason I only have this at 2 as well. Its mid block is not great, and we needed to make room for some other things to shore up our high and low blocks, because a lot of our stuff, especially in our attack lineup, is just mid blocks. So we want to make sure we can cover those other things, and we decided to do that with our foundation lineup. Moving on, we have 4 copies of Arrogant Disposition. It's a good spam foundation. Half the attacks in the game are punches. A lot of people play punches. If they're not playing, water or Asui or something like that, chances are they'll have some punches. Even some of the Asuis will play punch attacks because they have, the Haymaker. It's a punch. It'll be relevant in most games with its effect. But even if they don't have any punches, you have 4 6 checks in the deck. It shores up our low block with a decent low 2, and it's a spam foundation, so it just kind of is the all-around package. Most people run these in decks that can run them just on its merits of its block difficulty and check alone. And again, half the time that enhance will also be relevant to you. We run 2 copies of Encouragement. Response, flip, after an unblocked attack resolves, discard it from the card pool. We don't use momentum a ton unless it's Nitro Ignition, so we don't really care if the attack goes to momentum at the end most of the time. So in this case, it just clears your card pool, allows you to play more attacks cheaper, and just kind of keeps the turn going. It also helps if you've played a Nitro Ignition. You can use this on your second attack to clear from the card pool to trigger this response. So just all around, we also run a fair amount of Furies. We got a total of 10 Fury attacks in the deck. So, this one isn't Fury only. Just kidding. Forget I said anything about Fury. That's Bakugo's Enhance that is locked to Fury. But yeah, so this just allows us to clear our card pool. Like I said, we don't care about momentum too much, so we're not really losing much when you discard it. Sometimes having that extra cheap play cost of not having stuff in your card pool is way worth the effort. Next, we got 3 copies of Latent Skill. It's a nice high block, which is relevant to what we needed, and it allows you to discard 2 cards and draw 2 cards. Sometimes you don't draw the attacks you need when you need to finish the opponent off, or sometimes you don't draw the blocks you need, and this just allows you to dig a little deeper and make sure you get what you need when you need it. 2 copies of Nervous Habit. It's a little bit of stun hate, and it allows you to lose 1 health to gain 1 speed. Very relevant. Most of the time that 1 speed is going to be the difference between your opponent being able to block and not blocking, especially with the ability to destroy all their foundations on occasion. But yeah, overall it's good stun hate, and it's got some speed, and giving stuff speed is relevant when we're going to be giving everything +3 damage most of the time, so making it faster and other means is really nice. We got 3 copy of Defrosting. Discard the top card of your deck, fueling your Sugar Rush power up and or your once per game to get it out faster. And the main reason we have it here though is the effect is really nice. You can choose to give it +2 speed, -1 damage, or -1 speed, +2 damage. So if you know the opponent is already in a range where it's impossible for them to block, you can just give it minus speed, make it more damage. Or if you want to make it, since we're already giving stuff boatloads of damage, sometimes you'll just want to cut it by 1 to make it faster, to make it way less likely that it'll be blocked. It also works great on defense. Sometimes you don't want to, you're not planning on blocking something. So you can just give it speed because you don't care, you're not blocking, and give it a little less damage. Or in the case where you are for sure going to be able to block this, you just give it more minus speed and plus damage just to make it that easy, that much easier to block. We got 2 copies of Ice Gliding. You can commit this. This attack gets +1 speed or -2 speed. And if it's blocked, the next attack gets +1 or -1 speed. This is a good card. I thought about maybe trading one defrosting for, you know, maybe mixing these numbers a bit because they do similar-esque things. But I haven't done that quite yet. So right now we got the 4 defrosting and the 2 ice gliding. Like I said, very good case to just swap those numbers a bit. Maybe have 2 defrosting and 4 ice gliding, because ice gliding is a nice spam foundation. And again, it plays into mind games on your turn if you're using it offensively, or it's great on defense. Giving something -2 speed, especially if you're planning on blocking it, and guaranteeing that minus speed on the next one is really great. For a commit cost, that's nice. It gives you very good defensive and offensive capabilities. Next one, we got 1 copy of Self-Assured. It's a high block. I like having it in here. It's a unique, so that's why we're not running any more than that. It's also not super crucial considering the second attempts literally just doesn't do anything. Excuse me. But we're mainly here because you can commit, change the zoning of the attack. We run a lot of attacks that are mids. Sometimes mid isn't the best. Sometimes the opponent's just, you know, holding high blocks. A lot of people will run high blocks because some of the prominent decks use a lot of high attacks, like all of Tokoyami's kits high. Majority of Asui's decks have, you know, big threatening high attacks. They have some lows, but they're not the main thing you're scared of most of the time. It's the, you know, the tongue lashings and stuff like that that you're worried about blocking. So a lot of people tend to just naturally have high blocks. So being able to change your highs into lows, or, you know, your mids into low or high, just increases the chances that you might do something. It's also good on defense because, again, we do have only 12 high blocks and 13 low blocks in the base deck currently. So you don't have a ton of coverage on those. So being able to change it to whatever you need it to be to block it is very relevant, especially since we have a threatening mid block on Confident Counterstrike. Just changing it to a mid just so you can full block it and deal damage versus half block something, very good. Then we got 2 copies of Irrefutable Force of Nature. I've thought about maybe increasing this because things like Wall Cling and the one that sets your throw to 2. There's just a handful of foundations that will stop your big play. Well, it's not always going to be your end game play. Like I said, this deck doesn't use the once per turn as like the win condition or the crutch. It's just kind of there as like an extra threatening piece. But if you are going to use it and you do want to make sure they don't have stuff like Wall Cling, because if they have Wall Cling, they're just going to not destroy everything, and then they're just going to block it with Wall Cling on the field, and then just make it so you can't do anything. This makes it so they definitely have to think about it, because you're going to just open up, seal the Wall Cling, and now they're like, damn, now I have to destroy everything or I'm going to get bodied by this throw. And there's also just other things in the game that you're going to want to seal. With the remove as well, you can seal anything. So no matter what they have on their field, it gives you the option to just seal something that's threatening on defense or threatening on offense, depending on what your needs are. Being able to just turn off a very powerful foundation or asset is always good. Got 2 copies of Heroic Lineage. After your rival's attack receives a damage bonus, it gets -3 speed. You know, handfuls of everyone runs some form of damage bonus at some time most of the time. So this is going to be relevant most of the time, allowing you to make sure you can block that after they beef it up. It also has commit. Whenever your attack receives a speed bonus, it gets +2 damage. We have the ability to give anything we want to speed damage on our character, so this will also be relevant a lot of the time, where you're just like, oh, it got speed, cool, here's some more damage. And most of the time, this, you know, sometimes you're going to be using your +1/+1, not doing mind games, just making your last attack actually beefy, and this just makes it even more beefy. We got 2 copies of Calling for Backup. It's a decent spam foundation and allows you to draw. This card actually performed a little less desirable. It's still good to have the draw. Sometimes I didn't care that I wouldn't be playing it as my first enhance, being Dobby's first enhances are probably going to be your first enhance every time. This is also why it's a little clunky to use. I might trade this out for something. Maybe instead of lowering defrost, I might move these 2 copies to ice gliding instead, or something else that's in the deck, just to kind of shore that up, because we do need some draw. We don't have a lot. I think this is one of the only things that allows us to draw, and sometimes we need it, but it's a little clunky to use, which is why I might trade it out for something else that might give me a draw, or maybe just up latent skill and then up ice gliding or something. But I just found it a little too clunky. But again, there's also a lot of times where I had non-attacks in hand and I really needed attacks, so I didn't care that I was playing the enhance not first, because then that just gives me that extra, I don't care if I'm pitching a card I don't need for a card that I may need. Next, we got 3 copies of Natural Leader. It's a high block, which shores up our block line. It has commit this middle or kick attack. You get +2 speed. Like I said, more than half of our attacks are mid attacks, so this is very good. Most of our mid attacks are already naturally fast, making this even faster, which in my opinion kind of overcomes the mid being a little bad, because mid can be blocked by anything, but when your mid attack is speeding in at like 7, 8, or 9 speed, it doesn't really matter that it's a mid, because it's already hard to block on its own with just speed alone. We also have commit, choose 1 rival foundation. Abilities on the chosen card cannot be played for the rest of the enhanced step. Similar to irrefutable force of nature, this just gives you an out to if they have wall cling, or if they just have some foundation that's going to give you some form of trouble, you just turn it off. Then you don't have to worry. Again, it is a first enhance, so it's a little bit clunky with Dabi, but it's worth running because its speed enhance is also very well used in the deck. And sometimes turning off a foundation is way more important than giving your attack +1/+1 or the next attack +3. Like I said, if you're going to go your all in once per game, foregoing the +1/+1 to seal the wall cling, very, very potent and very worthwhile. The next one, we got 1 copy of In the Typhoon. I thought about maybe adding 1 or 2 more. That's why it's in the sideboard. It's just discard 2 cards, remove this foundation from the game, and this attack is considered completely blocked during the block step. Sometimes you just don't have the blocks that you need. Sometimes you're going to die if you don't fully block something. And this just allows you to make sure that you can block it. So if they amp the speed up, if they do something like play an ice wall and you just can't block it because you only have attacks in hand, it just gives you a nice out every once in a while. That's why we only have 1 copy. It's not super necessary, and we are a 6-hander, so discarding 2 cards is a bit of a hefty cost. Especially since we have so much speed control, it wasn't as necessary to have more copies of this. Because with all the speed control we have, there's a good chance that when we want to block something, we'll be able to block it. But there are those outliers that are threatening and deadly, and being able to just be like, yeah, this is blocked, I don't have to worry. And then we got 3 copies of Keen Observation. You notice we have a fair amount of 1 diff spams, but this is the only 0 diff. Under fire, there wasn't a lot to work with. We had this, we had In Danger, and we had In the Darkness, but In the Darkness doesn't do anything for us because 9 times out of 10 you're not going to want to commit Dobby. And also the other one is the Best Genist one, Interview with Best Genist, and we don't have Earth, so that is essentially just a blank foundation. So we decided to go with Keen Observation to fill in the deck and help us with our high blocks. There is some relevance, I guess. We have the your rival loses health due to an effect, they lose 1 more. The only thing in the deck that actually makes them lose health due to an effect is the Confident Counterstrike. So you're probably almost never going to use the ability on this, but it is still usable, and more importantly, we just needed the spam with a nice block, so that was good enough to have it in the deck. And that brings us to the end of the main deck portion of this deck. I hope you guys enjoyed the deck. I went a little bit long this time because I was kind of explaining the finer points of the mind games, because I feel like not a lot of people look at Dobby for the mind games. They mainly look at that once per game, and that's the reason they build the deck. But I feel like that's just the icing on the cake. Really, the power behind it is being able to play those mind games with your opponent. And with this attack lineup, I believe you put them in positions every time where they're just like, I honestly don't know if blocking now or later is the right time. They might, it opens up that window to just fail for your opponent more often due to just confusing them on what is the proper answer. And it just uses some cards that I've been wanting to use. So yeah, overall, I hope you enjoyed this deck. Again, I'm sorry it went a little bit long. If you're interested in more information, the side deck I mentioned before is cards to be considered. You guys can go ahead and look at that there. But if you want my particular insight on why they're there or why they might be useful in the deck, you guys can head over to Patreon and go ahead and I believe it's as little as $2 a month. You guys can join our Patreon and we'll have that bonus video there of my cards to be considered for this deck that'll play. And you can get my personal insight on why I think they're to be considered. And with that note, I'd like to thank all the patrons we do have. You guys support us greatly and we are very happy to give you some more bonus content and have you here, and we're hoping you're enjoying your time. We also have a Discord that you guys can go ahead and check out. There'll be a link in the description. We run some leagues. I think we're going to try to do them every month now. We've been doing it every month since this month. For My Hero, we also have some Grand Archive and some other games in the works that we're planning on doing leagues for. So if you're looking for a casual place to play where you can win some free prizes, because of the entry fee for those is free, you can go ahead and check it out. If you just want to talk decks or anything as well, we have a community for a bunch of different games. Feel free to join and check us out and give us any feedback. Yeah, so thank you guys and have a fantastic rest of your day.